All right, so this video is going to be a kind of a background into me and get into the details of the hell that I'd left, which had been created for me, imposed on me, in which I somewhat aided in creating back in the mountains before I moved to Charlotte. Now, I guess that a few things have to be laid out from the beginning. Is there are a few things that stick out about me. Now, the first is that I very quickly, when people meet me, it becomes clear that I'm a person who's very much unlike anyone they've ever met before. I'm very, I guess you would say, eccentric. Again, it's like this thing where everyone's unique. We're all different, but when you have me on one side and everybody else on the other, it almost makes all of them look kind of the same relative to me because I'm just a one-off. Um, Now, my background, my life, my upbringing. The first thing is that I think you can say for sure that I came from very unprivileged circumstances. My family was poor. Um, there was all kinds of abuse. I was subjected to very, very, very horrible abuse for years that I don't really talk, much about the details of. Um, but in terms of, so I was born on November 1st, 1980. My mother was 19. She had never graduated high school. My father was around 30. He had never graduated high school. Now the not graduating high school is kind of that's where you break. That's where all the similarities between my mom and my dad kind of end. My mom is a sweet, pitiful little woman that came from a kind of a dysfunctional, abusive, poor family, which she never will describe it in quite those terms. My mom tends to put like a rosy tint on everything, but for sure, she had her upbringing was she was underprivileged as well. Again, family poor, abusive family. My grandfather on her side, he was the greatest guy ever. When I was growing up, but he had been alcoholic before. Um, um, and again, she's her whole life she's been she's selfless. She works herself to death. It's like her 100% of her energy is devoted to everyone else's needs. Is how she works. And kind of how that works out is if you're someone who's completely devoted to the needs of others, you may find yourself uh, ending up with someone like my dad, who devotes all of his energy to his needs. The kind of the perfect match for somebody who's totally selfless, is somebody who is selfish. And my dad, I'm sorry to say, he was very troubled. There are reasons to have mercy on him and to kind of just take it for what it is. But I don't think by any means, any stretch of the imagination, you could call him a good person. He was for sure a criminal. Okay, and he had a bunch of personality traits, a bunch of personality characteristics that just kind of it's kind of hard for someone that's built like him to be a good person. And what I mean by that, he had the following traits. Okay, so he was a criminal. He would engage in any kind of crime that he could think up. So from the time he was very young, I mean, for sure by the time he was 13, actually before that, he was already involved in crime. Over his life, he would be involved in drug use, drug sale, drug manufacture, kidnapping, fraud, extortion, beatings, assaults, violence, beating women, this type of thing. He had no inhibition whatsoever against being cruel to other people. He seemed to not bother him at all to hurt other people. He was manipulative, extremely manipulative. He was a very skilled manipulator. He was a liar. He lied all the time. He used, exploited people took advantage of people. Um, he's one of these people, and what in the field of psychology, this set of traits that he has, or this behavior pattern, they call this antisocial behavior. And antisocial tends to have connotations of you tend to think of someone that's like a hermit that just lives out in the woods and never talks to anyone. Well, in the technical sense, as they use it in psychology, um, this term it has nothing to do with how socially outgoing you are, how extroverted. What it's meant to describe is a combined group of behaviors that indicates that you don't have what you might call pro-social emotions. So we live in this kind of tit for tat society, and it seems to be kind of how we're built as human beings. And the things that allow us to work in this tit for tat system is we have uh, a quality of empathy where we're very restrained against hurting other people. And the fact that other people are hurting, even if we didn't hurt them, bothers us. The pain of other people is something that's very real to us in our experience. Uh, well, we are honest, and we have a desire to be honest. We have these natural checks and balances that just exist in us, like guilt, remorse, where we're not just honest because we're afraid of what happens if we get caught, but we have this impending sense of guilt and this desire to see ourselves as honest people, and this helps to kind of police our behavior, kind of like on autopilot. We don't have to have someone with a bludgeon over our head our whole life telling us to be honest. Um, and again, this antisocial behavioral traits, this complex of behaviors, and you have them over your life. It kind of makes the picture clear that you don't have these emotions. You don't have empathy. You don't have guilt. It doesn't bother you don't have a desire to be a good member of society. And this kind of thing, by the way, um, is partly genetic. It's something like 25% of the variance in this of this behavior within the population is you can tie that to genetics, and it's very frequent or abnormally frequent on my dad's mom's side of the family. So his mom was a terrible person. Um, I have multiple cousins that I've heard about that were, they're about the worst people you can think of. I have one cousin named Frankie, who I met one time, very young, very barely remember this, but he was involved in all kinds of crime. I remember my dad telling me about um, it was one of my cousins, distant cousins, but it was their mother, and she had all these boys, and they were in trouble so often with the police that I believe they lived in Detroit, but that the police used their house as a landmark, and so you could have the police scanners going in your house, and I can't remember this woman's name. Her name was Maud, and the police be talking. So it's right up here. Go down to Maud's house, then take a right. Because this is like the home spot. Every police officer around knows exactly where Maud's house is at. Because we've been there every other day. And there's rowdy and mean. And it seems like he told me that whoever those kids were, they grew up to be criminals too. I have another cousin named Jerry, who is an absolute flat out monster. I never met him. My dad had told me about him later in life. So my dad died in 2009. It was within the 3 or 4 years before he died. He had told me about my cousin Jerry, um, who was one of these. This kid from the time that he was old enough to walk, all he ever wanted to do was hurt people, torture people, torture animals. My dad had told me that that this kid was 6 and my dad was 4. He had tied my dad up and rolled him down a bank into a creek. There were these weeds that grew out behind his house that would sting you. He would throw kids in those weeds. He would lay out tacks and nails around his sister's bed so that when she got out of bed, she would step on them. I believe at least one time he had plugged a frog into an electrical outlet. I talked to my aunt about this later on. I'd been separated from my aunt for a long time until my dad died. We reconnected then, and I was talking to her because some of these things that my dad said just seemed like they're out of this world. I did believe him though, but I was just going to talk to him about her, and she said, "Oh yeah, this guy was just unbelievably mean," and that she also said in regards to torturing animals, that he liked to go catch baby mice, field mice, and throw them on stove eyes and watch them burn. Now, of course, this guy didn't start out good, and it doesn't get any better at all. He was involved in all kinds of crime his whole life. Was already involved with the mafia at 18, and I was able to confirm my dad's story. And my dad had told me it's actually online. I found it online Googling about what happened with him and his drug dealing partner back in the 1980s. His he was into some very substantial, large sum money, big time drug dealing, and he had this partner that he was in business with, and they were at a bar or something, but there was a drug deal that was going to happen. So my cousin's partner was meeting this guy for a drug deal, and so they do it. And and my cousin's partner is driving up the road with this guy, and they're talking about this drug deal. And my cousin's partner starts to sense that something's fishy, and he thinks that this guy is an agent. It turns out this guy is what my dad called a DTF agent, which I'm sure stands for Drug Task Force. But what happens is when and what it was actually is this agent had said something to the effect as they go up the road. I'm not sure I want to go through with this anymore. Don't want to go any further with this, or something like that. Like this guy starting to say, like, hey, I'm in a car with a really mean dude, and something doesn't feel right here. So this gets the spider sense of this my cousin's partner, kind of it's his spider sense tingling, and he pulls a gun on this dude, puts it right in his face, and says, "Don't you move, or I'll blow you away." And he tells him, he says, "We'll go back down. We get this bar here. We'll get this guy, and we're going to take you to the house. We're going to give you a bath." And and they tell him, he tells him, if when we give you this bath, quote unquote bath, and we find a wire on you, this is what we're going to do to you. And it's kind of, you don't fill in the blank there. Obviously, you know what's going to happen if they find a wire on him after they get this guy. Now, this guy's talking about is my cousin Jerry. So he goes down to the bar. My cousin Jerry wears a leather trench coat with a sawed-off shotgun on one side, an Uzi on the other, and a 9mm in the back. My cousin Jerry pulls a shotgun on this guy, and holds the shotgun up at this guy's head, while his partner, they quote unquote, my dad, take him out to the boonies to kill him. Okay. Now what happens? And I confirmed this. This is another detail my dad told me that I confirmed. But they had gotten out to switch cars. They'd met a third person, I believe it was. They're going to switch cars. When they get out to switch cars, this agent trips my cousin, and he gets away. And when they had the court trial, they held up the agent's jackets as evidence because it had a bullet hole in it from where it was flailing in the wind. He's running, his jacket's flailing in the wind, and somebody's shooting at him, and it puts a hole in his jacket. My dad had told me that he had no doubt that my cousin Jerry had killed all kinds of people. He was never convicted, caught. My dad has no evidence. My dad just says from the type of person he is, it's kind of it's kind of impossible that he didn't, and that there was one in particular that he was aware of that for sure my cousin had killed this guy. It was actually two of my cousins were involved, and what it was my cousin Frankie and my cousin Jerry were in a gas station parking lot. There was this guy in the middle of them walking, and put in my dad's words, somebody walked up with a shotgun and split the guy in the middle in half. And this is way too big a coincidence to have these very mean, very criminal, evil people, both of them there with this guy. This guy gets killed, and they're not involved in it. And my cousin Jerry died at age 52 in Texas, a little bit before my dad died. And what happened there was there was something he was hiding out in Mexico, or had something to do with Mexico, but whatever it was, he had popped out of the woodwork, showed up at his mother's door in Texas, and told his mother that he was going to blow up her house if she didn't give him $10,000. And so he ends up living out in a camper out behind his mother's place in Texas until he dies of an overdose. My dad had told me that this guy, he said, well, you would never know. You'd never know. He's a monster. He says, when you go in a restaurant and you see him and he's so charming, you think he's Elvis Presley. So this guy literally he fits the profile of your completely, totally, full-on pathological, horrible, terrible, person. And again, I'm getting kind of long-winded here, but that's what I'm saying is that there's some very some bad nucleic acid material that seems to float around on that side of the family because it seems like way too many people are way too mean, and Jerry and these other guys they kind of put my dad to shame as mean and cruel as my dad was. Now, me and my mom we had to leave my dad when I was about 3. And what it was my dad was beating on my mother in front of me. He only did this twice, but that was one thing. And then the kind of the deal breaker was he was manufacturing drugs with his friends in the house with me there. And my mom hated this, and she would hide in the bedroom and lock the door. But it got to be too much, and so she just had to leave. Now we go to live with my grandparents, and I live there until I'm 8 or so, and I go to a school called Cloudland Elementary School, and then around the time I'm 8, 9, my mother remarries. We moved to North Carolina, which this place I lived in Tennessee is called Roe Mountain. It's on the far east, it's the eastern border of eastern Tennessee and North Carolina. It's right there at the first town over from the border. We moved to Newland, which is in western North Carolina, mountains of western North Carolina. Not maybe 20 minutes from Roe Mountain where I live. And I go to the Avery County school systems starting in 4th grade. Now things were not good very quickly with this my mom's second marriage, and I'd moved out at age 13. And around this time, I had also begun to see an outpatient psychologist that stemmed from severe behavior problems that I was having. And this guy had really helped me. My behavior had improved. Saw him for years, which I was a chronic, chronic behavior problem at school over time. Started out really good, for the first several years, and then it was around 5th grade I started to have behavior problems. 6th grade worse, 7th grade worse, 8th grade worse, and it got to the point that I damn near went to juvie jail around 7th or 8th grade over a mix-up I had where I brought Tylenol to school and gave it to a kid, and I told him it was drugs. It was, gave it on the school bus. Now this was actually kind of, I didn't really do anything that wrong here, but I did get kicked out of school for 10 days, and I deserved everything I had coming because I should have gotten kicked out way before then. But what happened with this situation was there was these kids, I had terrible headaches at school, and so every day I would bring Tylenol or Advil to school, add some generic Tylenol. I was on the school bus, and there was these kids, the little girls, maybe, I think one was probably 7, the other one was, the very little girl, 7, 8. Again, I'm 13 or whatever, and they keep bugging me about these pills I got, and I finally tell, I say, well, here, listen, these are drugs. They'll get you high. And I think I either threw some at some other kids, or I threw them for those kids. So here, go fetch. It's kind of like, leave me alone. And another thing was, when I'm talking to her, I'm trying to convince her, like, these are drugs that'll get you high. So this is a drug that'll get you high. Now what happens is later on, I live in a trailer park, and this is before I moved out, but right around that same time, this is what I got kicked out of school for. But anyhow, there was a police car that came to the trailer park and had this little 7-year-old girl, and she pointed at me. This police car leaves, and then another police car comes a little bit later and puts me in the car, and this guy reads me my Miranda rights. Of course, this is scary as can be. I'm a mean little shit, but I'm still a kid, and this is not good. I didn't like it. Scared me to death. But I tried to explain to him, that these are just Tylenol, generic Tylenol. And so I get my mom, and the officer had in his possession one of these pills that I had thrown at another kid, or thrown and told this other kid to fetch, whatever it was. This that I called a drug. And so she compares those two. He gets the bottle, and he's on the. I think he was on the phone with someone on the radio, like, well, it looks like a generic acetaminophen. It's acetaminophen, whatever. Now then explains to me that I told this little girl that this was marijuana. Now again, this girl's very young. I'm sure that probably by the time she gets home, she thinks I've told her this. She's probably heard the word marijuana before, but I told him that it was a drug. Now, the thing was, I didn't think anything of this. To me, it was as a point not even worth debating on. I was just kind of correcting him when I said it was a drug. He says, "No, you said it was marijuana." I said, "Well, no, I said it was a drug." Now, the significance of this, me saying that this is a drug, saying here's a drug that'll get you high, or saying here's a marijuana, is that under the law, if you say something is an illegal substance, it is an illegal substance whether it really was or not. So if I take a bunch of goodie powders and I take off the wrappers and put them all in a container or a plastic bag, and I hand it to somebody and say, "Here's some cocaine," or give me $5 and I'll give you this $1,000 load of cocaine that's actually goodie powders. Well, right there, under the law, it is as if I just sold this person however much cocaine that I sold, and so I'm going to go to prison. It's called counterfeit substance. Now, what happens is they take me to the principal's office, and they were threatening to send me to juvie jail. They suspended me for 10 days, and they ended up not sending me to juvie jail. And very long after this, I realized that there are a few things here. One was that they just had mercy on me. That I think that's the biggest part, was that I had increasingly bad behavior problems, and these counselors at school had told me, and also told my mom, that what tends to happen here is when these kids have behavior problems get worse and worse and worse, that there's some aspect of their life out of school that's also getting worse and worse and worse, and this is somehow what drives this behavior. And they wanted her to get me, to see an outpatient psychologist. So that was the mercy there. I think that was the biggest piece. The other was that I don't think that I could really get in trouble for telling them Tylenol is a drug. And that was why this officer was contending with me on this, because in one case I've blatantly committed a crime, and in another case it's kind of ambiguous, or maybe I haven't, because Tylenol is a drug. Now again, my intent as I was talking to this girl, I was telling her, and it was just kind of like I was being a little bastard, telling her to shoo away, like, here, it's a drug, take it, it'll get you high. I don't know any Tylenol that gets you high. That would be kind of a hard case to make. But again, I mean, they probably could have done whatever they want. I mean, who knows? They probably could have made a case and at least made my life hard for a while, if not had me, put in juvie jail or whatever. But they decided not to. Things get better, and then I discontinue this therapy with this guy, and I get things get worse again very fast. Now I'd gotten this is around the time I'm 15, and I had gotten a friend of mine was he was a grade above me, and or no, he was in the same grade. I'm sorry, but he was older than me. He'd been held back a grade, and he had his driver's license. Around the time I was 14, 15 years old, he had his driver's license. I'd already been messing up in school terribly. Now I'm in high school, and I'm hating school more and more. I had this thing that I would skate through school through my natural ability to learn. I was extraordinarily fast learner, and I kind of BS'd my way through every grade. Um, you know, um, it was an all talent, no work ethic type of thing. And I got into high school, and it became it's the first time that it was impossible to do this. That I'm just going to start failing. So in my ninth grade year, I failed a bunch of classes. I've got this friend. Now at this time, my mom was broke up with my stepdad, so we're living in Newland. I'm back, so I've moved to my grandparents out of my stepfather's house. But again, my mom's separated and they're divorced, and so we've been living in Newland since I'm about 14. And my mom works all the time. She works long hours. I got this friend that's got his driver's license, and she can't police what the hell I'm doing. She doesn't even know. She by the time it's even time for me to go to school or time to get home, she's not home either one. And so I'm skipping school all the time. And like I said, around the time I was 15, in my 15th year, I'd gotten a job at a pizza restaurant. I'd also, through this friend that was driving me around, I had became an acquaintance and friend of a guy that was a lot older than us. Again, I was 15, and this guy was about 22. And also, with my friend driving around, I had access to a social life outside of school. Now, combined with I've got this friend who's above the legal age to buy alcohol. And at that time, it wasn't all that hard for an underage kid to get alcohol. And so, I'm out in this social life, I start getting exposed to alcohol. And it was mainly, I was just kind of around it at first. I wasn't even drinking it. And well, what had happened that ended my career in high school was I'd been at a party at this older guy's house, and he had a bunch of liquor. No, his family did not like alcohol at all, and he had no use for it. So he wanted to get rid of it, and he thought a great way to do that would be to give it to me, and I took it. So I take this liquor home in a book bag, and it's Mickey's malt liquor and some other liquor. And my mom doesn't like alcohol either. I'm confident in my ability to hide it from her, except when I leave, when I go to school or whatever, and she's at home, she comes home from work early or whatever happens, she might find it. And so the way around this is I'm just going to take it to school with me. The school doesn't search my bags; they don't care. And so what I do is I pack this liquor, again, intending to do nothing with it, but I pack it in my book bag with a bunch of towels so the bottles don't clang as I'm walking. And I figure I can just take this to school with me every day, and then I'll be able to deflect my mom and hide it, whatever, when I'm home. I just can't leave it unattended at home when she might find it. So this is the day after my 16th birthday that I'm walking at the end of the school, and I've been dropped off. I'm late, and there's this other kid that I knew that was older than me. He was about 17, 18ish, and he was someone that I knew well. And I was saying to him, man, I've got cigarettes and a bunch of liquor in my book bag. He says, really, man? Hey, give me some of that. So what happens is we go to the high school bathroom. Now there's this kid from New York that we always picked on that walks by, and I had said something threatening towards him. Now I can't fully remember the details of what happened, but there was another teacher that walked by. I think was one of the things that she thought that this threat was directed at her, or it may have been that she said something about me threatening this kid, and I threatened her. But whatever happened was there was a perception that I had threatened her, whether I actually had or not. But it was something along those lines. I do remember for sure the kid from New York was there. It's fuzzy in my mind as to how it came across that I was threatening this teacher. It seems like it might have been that I was actually threatening this kid and she overheard it, or it might have been, the other thing. But anyhow, so I don't think anything of this, that I threatened this kid or whatever. And so we're in the bathroom, and he's in the stall, and he's taking this Mickey's malt liquor and pouring it in a Mountain Dew bottle. And his plan is he is going to put this Mickey's liquor in a Mountain Dew bottle and drink it in class. And all of a sudden, somebody comes looking for me because it's made it to the principal and whoever else that I've issued these threats. Again, that were just perceived to be directed at a teacher. And he comes in and says, "Are you Clint Williams?" And I say, "Yeah." And as he's coming in, he sees over there to the left, there's this other kid with the Mickey's malt liquor sitting on the toilet. And this other kid just takes him and looks at him, takes a big swig of his Mountain Dew bottle like nothing's going on. He's like, "Hey, what is this?" And so now we're in big damn trouble. Me and this kid both get kicked out. Now, actually, the other kid, he just quits. He would have gotten kicked out, but he just quits, period. He punches a garbage can, says, "Man, I'm busted, I'm done." Uh, so he goes home. Now, again, I'd been a misbehaving kid for years in middle school, and then I'd pick back up misbehaving in high school. Now, while I was seeing this counselor, I misbehaved very little, and when I did, I told the truth about it. I got caught by the principal. Say, yes, I did it. And this is a very nice thing for the principal because my normal MO was to weasel out of it, either lie my ass off or say, that I was just playing around, I didn't mean anything. And again, of being in the principal's office, getting suspended, detentions left and right. I had plenty of experience coming up with bullshit stories. They usually didn't work, but the one that I put on these people at school did for whatever reason. I can't remember what I told them, but I had them convinced that it was something, that we walked in the bathroom. There was already a malt liquor thing sitting on the toilet or whatever it was. So who knows? If this other kid stuck around, he might have benefited from my bullshit and been able to, to finish his senior year or whatever. But anyhow, the outcome is they have this counselor come in, the school counselor, who tells me, hey, listen, you've messed up, and maybe this school's just not right for you. Maybe high school's not right for you. I encourage you to go get your GED immediately. He says, you are you're very smart. He says sometimes when people go get their GED, what happens is they have to take classes to before they allow them to take the test. I don't think that'll be the case with you. I think that you'll be able to just skate right in there, go in there one day, get your GED, and you can keep going. And so I walk out of there, out of the high school with my bag. And so all I've lost right now is this one bottle of Mickey's malt liquor. I've got the rest of the liquor in my book bag that I'm allowed to leave the school and uh, I quit slash got kicked out. So they kicked me out. I quit at the same time. This is part of what this interaction with guidance counselor was. And I got to say something here, and this actually ties. This is about me from the beginning. Is that I have something kind of unique about me that I didn't. I wasn't made aware of this until I was in my 30s, and I was around the age of 32, 33. I had started reading about a condition called Asperger's disorder. And the more I read about this, the more it sounded like it fit me dead on. And I've been seeing psychologists for years at this point for other reasons. But this was increasingly like, hey, this is me. And I'd run it by some of the people I know. So, yeah, that sounds exactly like you. And I'd bought sometime before I turned 35, I'd bought a book called by a guy named Tony Atwood. That was a big, thick book about Asperger's disorder. And this didn't sound like to me like a book about Asperger's disorder. This sounded like a book about me, period. I know I'd had some disastrous self-diagnoses in the past. I'd had a bad habit in the past of self-diagnosing myself, and so what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to a psychologist and be evaluated. And so I looked up. I wanted somebody good, and I wanted the answer to be the right one. And so I looked up on my insurance from work, my insurance network, for a doctor was specializes in diagnosing. Made an appointment. We had three meetings. It consisted of interviews, and it was about I think about 5 or 6 different series of tests that I was given. And she comes back and concludes. And she gives me a diagnosis that I have an autism disorder. Now the thing is at this time they had taken out this diagnosis of Asperger's was no longer used. So they have a book called the DSM they use to diagnose people with psychological conditions, and the term Asperger's was out of there. That whole thing had been axed, and so now the new disorder, the new title that I'm given, diagnosis is called autism spectrum disorder without accompanying intellectual impairment. And so most of the people that would normally formerly have been under Asperger's, now this is their thing. And she told me, yes, if the diagnosis, if Asperger's was still in place, you would fit that as well. And this explained a heck of a lot about me. A whole lot about my life made perfect sense in light of this. Now the thing is autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, meaning it is a disorder of how the brain develops, which means that if you're diagnosed with it at 35, you're diagnosed with it at 45, 25, 5, 15, it doesn't matter. If you have this at 35, you have this at 45, you've had it from birth. That's the only way that you get a neurodevelopmental disorder. And so this has been me, my entire life. I just didn't. It took me a long time to figure it out. Um, and nobody else, strangely, figured it out until I mentioned it to them. Now, the effect of this condition that it's had on my life is there's a major imbalance in my abilities. I seem to be a person who has very acute strengths and very acute weaknesses. So there are not too many things that I'm just kind of average at. I seem to be at the same time extraordinarily gifted, very intelligent. The charge of genius has been leveled at me my whole life. I can't count how many times how many people have told me this since I was in school, and then after school. Now, what it is so here's where I excel. If it involves books, calculators, you know, computers, uh, things like this. Um, yeah, I mean, I have, this extraordinary ability to master and learn about all of the above. Now, the thing is just when you're a kid in school, I'm a kid, I'm in school for, this is kind of all your life consists of for the first 15 or so years of your life until either you're driving or, you have or your friends drive, or maybe however you get to your job and you have this other social life. So in school, this kind of makes me out to be kind of, all that was really apparent for the most part in school about this condition, which again, they don't know I had it, but what stuck out was the fact that I seemed like I was very gifted because there's nothing in school really that's that far outside of books, calculators, computers. So this was how I was known in school. I was known as this extraordinarily bright, unbelievably fast learner, and then that dragged his ass towards and didn't do anything, and it was kind of the other kids. Thought, how this must be nice just to be able, you don't do half your homework and you get a zero on it, but then you make 100 on the test, so you end up making a 75 and passing the class, which is kind of how I worked. Um, Again, this is once the behavior problems started. I started out doing very good in school early on, but again, as fourth, fifth grade, these behavior problems get worse. I get into this mode where I'm just lazy and unproductive, and of course, I had problems at home and all kinds of chaos that I just was not a good student at all. But I was able to milk, my natural talents. Now, as far as the weaknesses, the only one that really came up in school, and this is very well noticed, people knew this from early on, was that I am abnormally not athletically capable. I'm kind of poorly coordinated. I'm clumsy, and so you have your recreation in elementary school, and you got Team A and Team B, and each captain picks a person alternatively. You can forget about me being picked. I was always near the dead last of being picked for all of the teams. There were other kids that kind of felt sorry for me, and they would say, "Well, here's how you run faster. You need to do this." And it was clear that I was somehow, was very, very far behind in this area of being physically coordinated. I didn't learn how to ride a bicycle until I was, 10, 11 years old, very late. And this stuck out with people, but they never made a connection between this, hey, he's got these extraordinary intellectual abilities, and he seems like he's kind of like, like retarded in these other areas of life. Now, what happens is once I get a job, once I'm kind of outside of this world of books, calculators, computers, it's kind of apparent that, I can start to come across as not so obviously gifted. I don't have common sense. I don't know how to act around people. I'm kind of spastic, and I do silly things, and it's like I'm kind of clearly not all there. And then, of course, people notice this, like, hey, he's not all there, but man, he can do some math in his head, and this guy's smart. The impressions I made of people were all over the place. After this, the people that knew me well, they could kind of get a sense of all my different quirks. That I was, hey, I'm clumsy, I'm stupid in a way, absent-minded. I did silly things, and I have a terrible way of behaving around people. Where it's like, what this comes from is I'm socially naive. It's taken me a long time to learn how to function with people, but at this early age, for sure, I had next to no understanding or idea about how other people worked or about how my behavior affected other people. So I would behave in ways that were off-putting. I'd piss people off. It's kind of like clear, like this is Clint, and this is what he does. He's kind of out there, and we don't get him, but just whatever. And the other thing was that I had extraordinary difficulty driving. Um, I wrecked the first two times that I drove. The first time I was about 15, I tried. I wrecked in 30 seconds. I plowed into the back of this guy's pickup truck. It was parked. The second time I was 17, and this is when my friend that was driving me around he was kind of wanting me to, he was trying to help me learn how to drive. He knew I was scared to death of this, and so he's going to try to help me. I had a pickup truck I'd bought. This time I lasted about 6 minutes before I smacked into a tree, And it ended up being, it took me about 8 years to learn how to drive. And it wasn't the difficulty of the skill. I mean, driving's simple, looking back at it. It's the fact that the way I do my sensory processing, this kind of sensory overwhelm, that it was just too much for me to take in, that I couldn't think. And I would literally, I mean, people ask me to start their car, I would be trembling to even just start a car. Very hard to describe, but this is actually, I come to later find out, very, very common with people with autism. And that's a big explanation, again, for all kinds of stuff about my life, all kind of makes sense in light of this fact that I have this neurodevelopmental disorder. And so that, that was, again, going back to this thing with this principal, I'm sorry, the counselor, when I got kicked out slash quit high school. This was a recurring pattern where my teachers were 100% behind me. My guidance counselors were 100% behind me. When I was mean, when I was good, like there was, I could not be a rotten enough little bastard, for them to not say, "Hey, we believe in you. We want you to succeed." So I'm in this office. He's like, "Hey, man, you screw up again. I'm sick of your shit. Goodbye. Good riddance. This is strike 3000. You're freaking out. Just go home, be a loser, because that's all you're gonna be. I'll see you when you're in prison next time. Remind me when you're on. None of this stuff, which might have been warranted, but instead it's always this constant. Hey, you know, you've messed up. This might be that high school is not right. It's not right for everyone. But hey man, you're not out of the game. Go get your GED. You'll get your high school equivalent. You can just walk in there and take the test. You don't have to take classes. You can pick right back up. Where you left off. And so I leave the high school, again, walking out with my liquor still in my possession in my book bag. I see this other kid driving down the road that I knew, and he takes me home. Now, no, I've been behaving very erratically during this episode with the kid from New York and the teacher and all this other stuff that had happened. And then called my mom and told her that they thought that I was on drugs. My mom found this extraordinarily offensive and said, "Well, I'm glad you quit, because they're going to say that about my son. That's crazy." And at this point, she didn't even know that I'd had this alcohol, and I was not using any drugs at all. This was I was very much against drugs for my whole childhood up to that point. I would preach against them. My dad was a drug addict, and it bothered me as a kid. There was a time in sixth grade when these kids had got a hold of some drugs. They went camping, and I told on them. So I was doing the right thing in regards to that up until that point. And of course, my mom, I'm her, I'm her boy or whatever. And so this is extremely offensive that they would say this about her son. And so that was the end of me in high school. Again, I've got this job at this pizza restaurant. I'm exposed now to these people outside of work, in my social life. That we go to these parties at different places outside of school. I'm at work. I got this older friend, and I'm increasingly exposed to alcohol. Start to get involved in this a little bit. And there was a friend that I had at work, a kid that was a real good kid, kind of his whole life, and then he decided all of a sudden that he wanted to be a hellion and a party raiser, and he wanted to, and the first thing he wanted to do was to see what it was like to be drunk. He was very curious, and so he had eventually arranged for me and him to go to this other guy's house, and he tried to get this other guy to buy some alcohol, and he wouldn't do it, and so we ended up arranging somehow. I got somebody to go take me to where I lived and get this book bag, and we started drinking that. Um, Later on, this same friend got me into marijuana. That was the next thing he did, and he was increasingly liking this thing of him being a party kid. And he really talked me into this. I didn't want to do it, but I became into this lifestyle very very fast of mainly smoking marijuana. I drank some too, but the alcohol, the taste and everything, I didn't like it. And so I was much more into the marijuana as this progressed. And again, the drinking was at age 15. The marijuana started probably mid to late in my 16th year of life. Now, at this restaurant that I worked at, um, the very first day that I came there, I was offered marijuana by two guys. I was 15, one was 18, one was 19. So there were people involved in that from the get go, and there was more than that there. And over time, it seemed to be like that this became this drug thing seemed to increasingly dominate what was going on at work. It seemed like all the people that we work with just about are into drugs, and we hire somebody new. We hire some 17-year-old girl, and she likes to smoke weed, and she likes to do whatever. And we had this one girl that said, I smoke weed now. I used to do meth, and we increasingly, over time, it's like we're surrounded by this, and around me, not so much with me. It progressed for a long time. And now it did progress with me to an extent, and there was something that occurred there that kind of stopped me dead in my tracks in terms of the progression into the harder stuff. I'll get into that in the next video.